Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming to today's panel. For those who don't know, this is the second panel of a three-part series that is focused on highways and displacement, with a particular prioritization of some of the most vulnerable populations within the Austin and Central Texas area. And so this panel is focused on our indigenous communities. I am Folasade Fashina. My family is from the east side of Austin, and I'm really excited to be here as the moderator and also the representative for Rethink35. Before we start with our introductions, I would like to do a land acknowledgement, so I'm going to defer over to Noe so we can do a land acknowledgement real quick before we kick it off.
So today, the ongoing displacement of Black, Indigenous, and communities of color in Austin Seaside is connected to the legacies of extraction of labor, theft of land, transformation of landscapes, and the loss of cultures. We acknowledge with respect that the land that we are on is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Tonkawa, the Apache, the Isleta del Sur Pueblo, the Lipan Apache tribe, the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians, the Coahuiltecan, and all other tribes not explicitly stated. Additionally, we would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Alabama Cushara tribe of Texas, the Kickapoo tribe of Texas, Carrizo and Comecrudo, the Tiwa Pueblo, the Caddo, the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Wichita, the Chickasaw, the Waco nations, and all other American, Indian, and indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become part of these lands and territories in Texas, here on Turtle Island. Not all indigenous peoples listed claim Texas as ancestral lands, as many were forcibly relocated to Texas from their ancestral homelands. It is important to understand the long existing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to acknowledge our place within that history. The state of Texas is a product of violence carried out by colonial powers of Anglo and Mexican groups. Multiple genocides were committed on the native peoples of Central Texas as natives were hunted, detained, converted, and colonized in successive waves. Many people were also assimilated, including most people labeled as Coahuiltecan and Lipan Apache, with no treaties or recognition.
Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists to you, starting with Noe. Noe is an educator, community organizer, and advocate for social and environmental justice based in Austin, Texas. With a strong commitment to land justice, housing justice, and environmental justice, Noe works to address the pressing issues facing his East Austin community of Montopolis. Originally from Querétaro, Mexico, Noe immigrated to the United States with his family at the age of 8. He grew up in Montopolis, where he continues to live with his wife and 2 children. Noe has over 13 years of experience teaching in the Austin Independent School District. He has had the privilege of working as a dual language educator in his neighborhood school, serving the students and families of Montopolis and East Oltorf. As an organizer, Noe currently serves as the Land and Housing Justice Director at Pedro, people organized for the defense of Earth and her resources. He brings a wealth of experience in community organizing and coalition building, particularly focused on environmental and social justice issues within Montopolis and beyond. In addition to his work with Pedro, Noe collaborates with Start Empowerment to develop environmental justice curricula and works closely with educators, teachers, and community organizers across Texas to expand the organization's reach and impact. Noe is an active member of several community organizations, including Community-Powered ATX, Montopolis Neighborhood Association, Montopolis CDC, Allison PTA, Education Austin, and the Austin Community Development Commission. Can I have an applause for Noe? Next up is Pedro Hernandez. Pedro Escobar Hernandez Jr. is a native Austinite that was born in East Austin and grew up in the Montopolis neighborhood where he currently lives. He is a proud father of 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Pedro is an environmental and social justice advocate for Pedro and has worked on many issues ranging from voter education and registration, COVID rapid response team, community outreach, preserving the Colorado River, fighting Cap Metro to get fair fares for new light rail, to educating our youth through the Youth Scholars for Justice Leadership Development Workshop with Pedro. He has been with Pedro since 2016. Pedro is the chair for Vasquez Fields Neighborhood Association and is an executive member of the Montopolis Neighborhood Association. As a member of the Montopolis Neighborhood Planning Contact Team, he has fought developers to keep his community affordable for those currently living there. He was a member of the Project Connect Community Investment and Wealth Building Advisory Committee. He is also a member of the Austin Latino Coalition and the Texas Anti-Poverty Project and many other local organizations. Pedro is a 2018 recipient of the Cesar E. Chavez Si Se Puede Award, which recognizes individuals who have demonstrated leadership in changing lives and transforming communities. An applause for Pedro, please. And last, but most definitely not least, we have Madi Gutierrez. Madi Gutierrez, originally from Corpus Christi, moved to Austin when she was 8, has lived in Montopolis all her life since moving, and graduated from Eastside Memorial High School in 2020. Since then, she has obtained 2 associate's degrees, one in biology and the other in general sciences at Austin Community College. She decided not to continue her education at Southwestern University in biochemistry. But she has been a part of PODER since 2015 as a Young Scholar for Justice, although she is not the youth coordinator for the Young Scholar for Justice program at PODER. She has a lot of work in the community, and we are happy to have a young member of our community on the panel as well. Applause for Madi. And then another applause for all of our community members that are here today. Before we get started, I want to mention that although this is an Indigenous-focused panel, that not everybody is directly affiliated with an Indigenous tribe, and that is something that is directly due to the colonization that has occurred in many communities that allows for people to not have those connections and has removed those connections from a lot of people. And so while Pedro is affiliated with the Yaqui Indian tribe, our other 2 members are not affiliated, but they are still able to provide that context and that useful perspective that we are able to share today with you all. All right. So our first question, how are you connected to this cause?
The highways, but also, I mean, it all intersects with other types of displacement, right? It all comes together. I can kind of start backwards. Right now, we're working in my community of Montopolis to fight displacement. We're working now as I work as the Housing Justice and Land Justice Director at PODER. I'm working in the overall community, and one of our groups is also Community Powered ATX that I work with. We're working to fight displacement in other areas and in different ways. So that's what I do now. But as we kind of go back, I start thinking about, why I live in Montopolis, why I'm there. And it's same thing, it's that the fact that we were segregated to those areas. My family was segregated to those areas. What my generation was just the affordability, the connections to the family, the fact that those were the only places that we could afford. So we know how that is. And then if we start thinking about, the history of, those communities, of course, we talk about the segregation of East Austin from West Austin due to the Highway 35. And then even before that, we start thinking about, getting people being pushed out to certain areas outside of the city center for economic reasons, for economic development, things like that. And so just having all that history and using that knowledge to, with the work that I currently do, that's my connection to this. And then just the communities that I serve. right now. Like we said, you know, a lot of us that either immigrate from other places or from this area bring, you know, we are indigenous to those areas, but, you know, again, because of economic reasons, you know, we are displaced and forced immigration, forced displacement of people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For myself, pretty much the same thing. Of course, I'm from the Yaqui Indian tribe, so that's part of my connection. And same thing that he said, I live in this community, born and raised here. Well, I was born on the east side off of 12th Street and moved over here to Matapas when I was 4. And we've been living this struggle all our lives, and taking it back a little bit more also, how we got to this point with not just the highways that are causing the displacement, but with the trails that the Indians, you know, started. A lot of those trails are now renamed, and some of them are named after the streets that we currently ride right now. But I believe that's about it. It's pretty much the same thing.
I've been residing in East Austin since I was 8, so I kind of grew up with a lot of the kiddos on the streets. I had to learn to adapt to live in this area because, you know, it was the most affordable when we first moved here. But on the side of Metropolis I was living at, I remember how 183 used to be 2 lanes only. And then after the development, further later, when I was a part of Boled, that's when we tried to protest to keep Cactus Rose. And we also lost that due to the expansion of 183. And then I feel like eventually for me and my family, as the highway started progressing and started expanding more, we eventually lost our place due to gentrification. And my place is now an Airbnb where people just come and stay. And it's really convenient because you can just take 183 downtown and to the airport. So I felt like that's how it affected me and my family.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that your response kind of leads directly into this next question of, there's a common misconception that Indigenous land loss is a thing of the past. Can you speak to some current fights to combat Indigenous land loss?
I kind of do want to go a little bit back in the history, just a tiny bit, to you know, get us to where we are. You know, like I was saying, it's and Pedro was talking about, you know, the people that used to live here, right? So we can talk about Anglo settlement, I guess, where in the 1830s Anglos came to this area, and what the reason for that was the land speculation, coming in for the land. Leaving the eastern states and coming here for land, and the fact that the way they came and arrived here was that with this thought of nobody lives here, you know, we can just take this land, and so when they do realize that there's people here, of course, as I mentioned in the land acknowledgement, you know, committing genocide in order to get this land. And then what happens is they establish cities, right? They establish cities, even talking about highways and roads. Pedro's mention of the fact that a lot of the indigenous paths and roads that were used became the highways, because, I mean, my thought on that is that usually indigenous tradition is following let's say deer trails, right? Because it's the easiest way to cross a river to get to the safest routes. And then it just goes from there. The Spanish, of course, used the same roads to travel. And then now, again, Madi was talking about 183. If you look at 183, that used to be a crossing path for indigenous people. Became the Spanish Camino Real, because it was the easiest way to cross the river. And then it became ferry, then a bridge, and then now it's this massive highway, right? That you know, displaced the Cactus Rose trailer park and, you know, places like that. And so just the fact that, you know, people came, Anglo people came and said, you know, like there's nobody here, you know, we're gonna take over this land, and yeah, committed genocide just for land speculation, right? And then so that leads us to what, you know, where we are now as a city. So Austin became a city on, you know, indigenous land. Then it was developed like a city with a map and everything. Where we can think about the 1928 master plan when we, you know, decided that, you know, these are the areas zoning, right? Like we start talking about zoning. These are the areas where we want to develop, where we can move people and have industry, have all of that. And then so with the 1928 master plan pushing everybody that's Black, brown, indigenous, low income to a certain area because you want that land. So it's the same land that, you know, 1830s they took, and then now we're divvying it up and pushing people further out, right? And of course in the 50s with the highway coming right straight, like creating that very noticeable line of, you know, you belong here and we belong over here, and same thing, land speculation. And then it goes on to getting closer to where we are now, where like this environmental movement in the 1990s with like the Save Our Springs Alliance, right? Where increased development due to like maybe like tech industries coming in the late 80s, early 90s, saying there's a lot of development going on, we need to protect certain areas. But what they did is they came up with an agreement really with developers that said, hey, let's protect this land, which was west of I-35, and then create the east side as a desired development area where you can have industries, you can have this, you can have that. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, Pedro, but Pedro was telling me a couple of days ago about the inconsistency in zoning, right? When in East Austin, when they created the maps, yeah.
Yeah, when I looked at this question, I still saw it as currently the creation of the neighborhood associations. That was, you know, what was through the zoning, you know, and when the city divided the city, it was divided into 54 neighborhood associations. And East Austin, East Cesar Chavez, that neighborhood association was the first one to get started. And through that zoning, we were able to see the increase in property taxes. It made it possible for the residents. It made it impossible for the residents to access home equity loans because their homes were no longer single family zoning. And those residents didn't even qualify for federal programs anymore, such as the home improvements, home improvement repairs. Due to that, the reason for them being zoned commercial now, or commercial mixed use. And to this day, the city continues to adopt those new zoning changes, vertical mixed use, the ADUs, the home initiative, the DB90, which he knows very much about. And all those rezonings do not benefit us. You know, they're just it's not for the working poor. It's not for the working poor at all. Right now, they're asking for only 10%. It calls for only 10% affordable units at 60 to 80 MFI, which leaves us out again. You know. Let's go for the DB90. And I don't know if you want to talk about.
I felt like y'all two had more knowledge on this part compared to me, so I really don't have anything to say.
Yeah, and so I mean, I guess I can go ahead there. Yeah, so I mean, I guess what we're saying is that, making the connection from, from just the genocidal theft of land from the beginning and how that is what we're still dealing with. It's the same land. It's the same land, and and really it's the same people that are being affected. And so as Austin was divided, west and east, and what you can do in one area and what you cannot do in other areas to protect it. We see now where we are is we see things like what Pedro was talking about, like the smart growth plan, where they're like, we're gonna build all this high density in the urban core area, blah, 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 but without really focusing on the low income people that were living there, with the, like actually building affordable housing, actually taking into account who lives there and what is their needs. So building housing based on the need of the people that are living in those areas. So causing a lot of gentrification. And what these, like the smart growth plan, high density, all of this, I think you mentioned DB90, BMU, like all those things, all those zoning programs, what they do is that they cause a lot of land speculation, which again goes back to the beginning. The speculation of if you owned a single family home and it was like a fourth of an acre, and your whole area gets rezoned based on one of these programs, then now your property's worth a lot more. Because like, let's say now you can build 3 or 4 houses on that same property that only has one house. Well, what happens in our communities is that we get predatory developers. We get letters. Grandma gets letters. Phone calls, yeah. Things like that. And then they start, we want to buy your property. And a lot of things that we see in our community that we've been working on is helping people with their owed taxes. They get behind on their taxes, and these developers research and they know that, and they go and they say, hey, we know that you owe $25,000 in taxes. I'll give you $200,000 for your property, and you're all clear. Whereas where he knows, the developer knows he's going to make a lot of money by developing that property. So these policies that come out of City Hall, or to us, they're the same way. It's still land speculation, it's predatory. Same way that, like I say, we've been fighting for hundreds of years for the same thing, to try to keep our land. The fact that all of these most of them are rental properties as well, even, which means that the rate of home ownership is really declined. Black home ownership has declined so much in East Austin. Hispanic, Indigenous, Brown, home ownership has declined a lot in East Austin. I think Austin's like 57% renters, or probably more now.
Yeah, if I can jump in real quick off of that. All the phone calls and the mails, the letters that they get, they jump on that, because we've never seen that amount of money that they're talking about. So we jump on that. And that's why a lot of communities have lost, a lot of people have lost their homes because of that, because they see that dollar amount and they go for it. Not knowing that when you move out, you're gonna have to move out to Bastrop or something, because you're not gonna be able to afford anything here. And on a personal note, when my father passed away back in 2010, my mom had the property, our house that we grew up in. And of course, when she passed away, my sister was in charge of everything. And she ended up selling the house to the developer, because she wasn't gonna be able to afford the rent, because she had her own, the property, because we already owned the house. But the property taxes were gonna be too high, that she wasn't gonna be able to afford it. So we held on to it as long as we could, and then she ended up selling it. And that hurt me, because I grew up there, 45 years being there. But I got a little lucky, and moved right across the street because that house was vacant for a while. And the one thing I was able to save was one of the trees that my parents planted in the front yard. So on a personal note, that's, you know, that's my story on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're sorry, we're still, you know, we're still suffering from the same thing because of like the fact that there's so much disinvestment in our communities. Things that we had to fight for so much just to stay in our communities. And so when you have any policy that says, you know, this is a desirable area, this is a place to develop, what happens is that the most vulnerable aren't able to take advantage of those things. And so our properties that used to be just, you know, undesirable really to people in certain areas of town are now properties that people really want, and people want to build on, and people want to, you know, want to own to make a profit. And one thing that, like I said, I can talk about a little bit of the history of Poder. One of the biggest things is fighting environmental justice, which goes along with this, and we see it. We see the interconnectedness of this with displacement because I don't know, Madi, do you want to talk about the tank farms, the history of the tank farms a little bit, and then I'll add to that.
Oh, it's been a minute since I've actually discussed about the tank farms and stuff. But as far as my recollection is that due to all the tank farms, the BFI and stuff like that, it has affected neighborhoods of low income. It caused a lot of, how would you call it? A lot of like medical illnesses. So people were developing like asthma, people were getting really sick, they're getting like really bad like
Getting headaches.
yeah, like medical stuff was really bad. So it forced people to, you know, to move out those areas, or if they couldn't afford to move out, they had to deal with it until it got really, really bad. So this is where Poder stepped in, where they protested against all these different tank farms, and then the Holly power plant as well. And I feel like
Yeah, I can
yeah, it's really not that
yeah,
much.
and so what happens after this, like after being successful in these environmental
Can you
justice.
just quickly explain what a tank farm is?
Sorry, yeah. Alright, so the story before that I said, you know, like East Austin has incompatible zoning. You know, you can have industrial next to single family homes, things like that. So they built the main three things that our organization has been involved with is the tank farm, which are fuel storage tanks that were at the corner of Springdale and Airport, almost like on the four corners there. The BFI recycling plant that was at Bond Road and close to Airport, and then the Holly Street power plant. So those things were causing environmental damage, and also health damage to the people living around there. Well, they fought for years and years to get these closed down, the area cleaned up, and all of that. And now what we're seeing is that now these houses, these properties that were next to these polluting, you know, facilities, are now desirable. And then that comes in, what comes in is what we were talking about. Now people are, you know, predatory. They want to move to this Holly neighborhood that, yeah, I don't know, Pedro
If anybody
remembers. Yeah.
If a lot of people don't know about, I'm going to go back to Metropolis.
Yeah.
Metropolis was considered Poverty Island. That's what we used to call it, Poverty Island. Nobody wanted to come over here from the other side of the road, the river. But of course, when they started building the highways and changing things, moved the airport over here to Del Valle. Once all that happened, we became an opportunity zone. You know, everybody wanted to come over here to Metropolis all of a sudden, and it was a gold mine because we're right between the highway and downtown. So everybody wanted to move here, and that's when we saw the change really quick in just a matter of couple of years, it changed really, really quick. And now going back to the tank farms, it took a while for all this to happen, to take change, because what they had to do was first, start off with getting the neighborhood associations together, getting the community to come together, and then after that, they had to get all these testing done, all the testing for the chemicals that they were dealing with, and reports and all this other stuff back. Going forward a little bit more, I don't even think it was 10 years, and they started looking into developing on that property. And honestly, it wasn't even safe to even be building on that property yet, and they still did. So, yeah, that's not good at all.
Yeah, so the connection here is disinvestment, low property values, right? Because of these industries, the zoning and all of that. The community itself having to take this initiative of fighting it, cleaning it up and all of that, and then now becoming a desirable area, and now the fight here is to stay in the area that you fought so hard to clean up, to keep for yourself. And so that's where we are.
And they even did a toxic tour,
Yeah.
to let the city officials come and actually witness that for themselves.
And that's one thing that I will say, working this space, is that the community always has to go above and beyond to prove something, even if you see it there. Like the city, state government, federal government always says, well, you have to prove it. And so it takes community, takes a lot of extra work to just, say, hey, this is happening. Like, whether it be like the environmental justice stuff, the housing stuff. Like right now we're fighting, talking about me knowing everything about DB90, because DB90 is a zoning designation program that gives developers extra incentives to build higher and denser. And so our communities are like, no, we do not want this in our communities, and this is why. And we have to put it all together. People that have full-time jobs, people that have families to take care of, have to put all of this together and prove it to the city that this is damaging for our communities. This is causing gentrification, this is causing displacement. And we have so many outside factors or outside groups that are like, no, this is good for your community. And the community itself is saying, no, we're not. And there's so much that's put on the community to try to prove that. Same way that all these families had to organize and say, we're getting sick, we're getting cancer, we're getting asthma in these times, like they had to prove it themselves. They had to test the soil themselves to prove all of this stuff. And the same thing is happening right now with what we're fighting right now.
Yeah. Thank you for making those connections. Yeah. I think that it's very valuable to understand how a lot of these impacts happen, especially in the way of how the highways exacerbate those modes of segregation. East Avenue turned into I-35, and then after that, the land that they were talking about that was previously undesirable, and they moved the Black and the brown and the Indigenous communities over there. And then once you start building up the highway, and the highway is a little bit too close to the land that was desirable, now y'all want to come out here because you don't want to be too close to the smog. You don't want to be too close to the noise. And so now you're moving out further into the east side, so you're further away from it. Or even with what Madi talked about in her first answer to the first question, with how with 183 expanding, now we're going to displace y'all so that we can make this highway bigger, because the Indigenous communities, the Black communities from last panel, are considered the throwaway communities. And so it's okay for us to move y'all around at our whim. And on that same note, the next question is basically, many people think the impact of land loss doesn't extend too far past the specific people that have lost the land. Can you please speak to the impact of land loss and displacement on the wider community?
I'm gonna have,
For
myself, this will probably go into something that Johnny might be able to talk about also. The single family homes being destroyed. You know, that's throughout the city, you're seeing that. Single family homes being destroyed and families are being driven out of Austin. Currently there's like 5 schools that have been closed down due to under enrollment, is what they're saying, under enrollment, which is actually the loss of families because they had to move out. Apartments are being built to serve only single people or couples, which are just studio and 1 bedrooms. And those apartments do not serve our community. We're a family community, you know, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. And then of course, the apartments that they are building, they're luxury homes or luxury apartments. Again, that takes us out of there and causes displacement and increases our property taxes. Going back to where my family grew up, they built 2 houses on that 1 property. And that property, those houses were going for over $500,000 each. So that was over $1 million property all of a sudden. So, and I know you can probably touch on the current thing, Acacia.
Yeah, I can go into that. Yeah, so my connection to this when I saw this question was just thinking back on like our indigenous cultures of community, right? Of having community. So we were like thinking about maybe like the paths that Pedro was talking about. In Austin, we have like the water sources, like, you know, living in this area, especially back in the 1830s, you know, you had to know how to travel through here, where to get water, where to protect yourself from, especially in the heat, right, in July, August. Once those things are taken away from you for land speculation, for developing, creating cities, you know, that is forced displacement. You know, some people left on their own because these things were taken away from them. Well, I see the same thing thinking about what we're dealing with right now, is when there are certain things that are taken away from you, then it breaks up that community network. Montopolis, I think Montopolis has always had those large community networks. We have some large families in Montopolis, multiple. Growing up, I had like 16 cousins living, you know, we all grew up together, blocks away from each other, going to the same elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Once these forces of, you know, gentrification and displacement are felt in our community, people start moving, people start losing their homes, people, you know, again, some are very drastic, very, you know, destruction of like the mobile home parks, things like that, where people, you know, and some people chose to not stay in their neighborhood for other reasons. But when you break up these community networks, again, that's traditional community networks. In the Black and Indigenous communities, we have these large networks. And they're not just based out of like tradition, they're based on, you know, basic necessity as well. I mean, again, with my family, you know, four of us cousins would go to my house after school. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, growing up, it was like, oh, that's cool. We all get to go to our house, and then, you know, their parents come to pick them up at 5:30. And I didn't think about the fact that gave my aunts and uncles time to have a full-time job. Otherwise, they would have to pay for childcare or, you know, take off from work early to come pick up their kids from school. So things like that. You know, when you get sick, who do you stay with? Oh, you stay with grandma. You stay with your cousin down the street. You know, things like that. So those networks you start breaking down, and you know it affects the whole community. People are now paying for childcare, whereas before they weren't. People are that are food insecure or don't have a place to resort to get some food before their next paycheck comes, things like that. So it exacerbates those pressures that we're already feeling as a low-income community. As a teacher, I see that so much as well with our student population. One thing about being a teacher is that that like stability is like key to education. If you have a student, I mean, you can tell, like by the end of 5th grade, like I taught elementary school, so by the end of 5th grade, when they're going to middle school, you can tell the kids that have been here from pre-K all the way through, how they've advanced, and then the students that are just coming in and out, living in the neighborhood for a couple of months, and then having to find somewhere else to go because the rents went up or their house got demolished or things like that. And then so just the effects on education, the effects on family stability. I mean, everything just starts breaking down when you start breaking these community networks.
I feel like for me, it was a little different because it was just me and my family here in Austin. So when something was going on, when somebody was sick, whenever we needed just to get away, we couldn't really do that. So I was able to create a family within the community. I resided off of Grove for a while. I want to say for about 6 to 8 years. I was living at Grove before I moved to the other end of Montopolis, right there by Del Monte. And
next to my cousin.
Yeah, so I was able to hang out with the other kids. My mom was able to make friends with the neighbors, and that's how we kind of established our community, was just integrating ourselves. And then eventually, when all the gentrification started happening, we started losing those people, so it became harder to stay together. And then aside from that, I feel like another important thing is kind of how Noe was talking about youth. Since I'm the youth coordinator at Poled, I feel like youth involvement is a big one to kind of, I wouldn't want to say derive, but to kind of educate the youth that they also have a say in this stuff. So kind of integrating them into, I guess just educating them as far as what's going on. They start to see this is happening to me and I didn't even know it. Because of course youth tends to be let out of the ongoing instances and things. But yeah, as far as that, I feel like a lot of them are getting pushed out further and further. I'm starting to get students who are part of the program in the summer. They live in San Marcos. They have to come all the way from Kyle just to participate. So we try to keep the kids localized. But with that, within the first 2 weeks, they're oh, I moved and I'm no longer in the East Side area. I'm now somewhere up north or somewhere south, and it's harder to get them integrated because they're no longer in the community that they're used to.
Exactly. And then to connect back to some of y'all's answers to the previous question, there's also the factor of the health impacts of if this community is considered your throwaway community and you get rid of, let's say, these specific houses so that you can expand your highway, the other people who are still there are the ones who are going to get those after effects of the highway being right next to their home. Because before, the street was further away. It was after these other neighborhoods and then some more space and then the street. But since you encroached on that area, the people who are left have to deal with the cancer, the asthma, the allergies, the negative health impacts that come from being so close to a highway. And that's what consistently happens to a lot of these communities, is where you think that the land loss, like I said, only extends to people who lost their land. But with highways particularly, the people who are impacted by the highway being so close to the remaining people are still members of that community.
Can I throw something in there with that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right here, when they started doing the highway on 183, Cactus Rose, okay, that was a mobile home community that they were trying to, the developer was trying to revamp. That community got together, they created a neighborhood association and fought as much as they could because they weren't going to get anything out of it. They weren't going to get any help with moving, relocating, or anything like that. We stepped in, Poled stepped in, well, not really Poled, it was more of the neighborhood association, the Thomas Neighborhood Association. We stepped in and helped them create that. But what I wanted to get to was, because it was a mobile home park, the city then started attacking all the mobile home parks in the city and they were trying to remove the mobile home zoning. So that was a shocker to me to see that. So we ended up having to go to all these mobile home parks in our community just to let them know what's going on, to try to help fight them. And of course, we ended up losing one right here, what was it called? Comfort Park, right there on Riverside. And that's one of the areas where now, with the East Riverside corridor and the rail coming over there, they're trying to redevelop that. You know, it's still open right now, but they're trying to redevelop that. They're trying to put that was one of the spots that they were going to put the stations on the stations, but they moved it over to Yellow Jacket.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to get
Yeah,
to.
one thing about mobile homes, the importance in our community, you can see it, in a lot of low-income communities, is that it's like a first step to owning a home. In East Austin especially, but definitely in probably anywhere where people are segregated and create their own communities, despite all the pressures, despite all the disinvestment, despite everything, we create our communities. Home ownership's a big deal. It brings you power, brings you independence, things like that. And so mobile homes are just the first step to owning your own home. And that's another thing, like I was saying, like we have to prove these points to, and every time we have these conversations, but one thing that people don't like that I say a lot is that in East Austin, the Black community, brown community, we love our single family homes because it's a source of independence, it's a source of power, it's something that we never had and that we acquired despite all the pressures, and so that's something that, that like Pedro was saying, like we're losing, because all these threats, and we fight hard to keep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And to say, Metopolis, we fought the best. We fought the longest. We're keeping it going. We're not. They're coming over here to gentrify us, but it's taking a long time. We're fighting. We're fighting every step of the way.
We're still there.
Yeah. And on that fight, I think it leads directly into the question of what mechanisms or tactics tend to be utilized to displace Indigenous communities via highway expansions.
Of course, highways have always been the reason that communities get segregated. In West Austin, MOPAC, that divided the African community and aided in their displacement. And of course, 35 was for the Hispanic community. That was the dividing line there. And that's what became the border wall, that separated us completely. And now that they're coming over here to our property or our land, because it's more desirable now, that divider is going to be pushed over to 183 now. So.
Yeah. One thing about 183, actually I think it hits on a point that we've all made. It's that when they moved the airport over to the valley, they always wanted like a clear shot from downtown to the airport, back and forth. And so with the redevelopment of 183, that's what we got. We got, you take either 7th Street or Cesar Chavez straight from downtown to the airport, just back and forth like that. And what happened with Metopolis in that situation was that we saw a huge increase in Airbnbs when that happened. And the reason is because if you're visiting Austin, whatever, for pleasure, for business or whatever, you want to be in a place where you can get to all the places that you need to be fairly easily. So from our area, you can take a lift, 5-10 minutes, you're in downtown, Rainy Street, whatever, you're you can do that. But then when you have to go back, you want to be close to the airport as well, just to, the other way, it's like a 5-10 minute trip, Lyft, Uber trip back to the airport. So we saw that with the expansion of 183, was that it created that throughway like that, and yeah, we see it a lot. I think Madi mentioned that the house she used to live in was sold and turned into an Airbnb, and we have a lot now. And I think the question was other mechanisms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are other mechanisms that are used. To me, the first thing is the land speculation. Like again, we saw it when a lot of times, even before like the community knows that something's coming to your area, like other people already know, investors already know, developers already know. Of course, the city and state governments already know what's going to happen. They keep up with these things, and then we start seeing people buying up properties. The Cactus Rose, that was one. The developer started buying that property. We're like, why would you want this property? It's just full of old mobile homes, but they know that something is coming, and they start. So what the city's response to that is they start rezoning properties, allowing rezonings to, okay, let's take away this mobile home designation and let's allow the developer to build, 4 stories, 5 stories, things like that. And so that's the way we see it. We know something's coming because people start buying up the properties. Pedro mentioned the light rail. So like Project Connect is right now on East Riverside is a huge displacer of people. So the Project Connect line is coming down on Riverside. When the conversation just had barely started, we already saw people, developers buying those properties. I remember those properties along East Riverside, people's homes, a church that was demolished on East Riverside, for redevelopment. We started seeing all these things even before there were any plans of exactly what was coming. We already saw the developers, the land speculation and all of that. So it's creating this mass displacement of people. The same with the highways, same as anything like that doesn't take any of those plans, that doesn't take the community's input into consideration. Like who lives there? What does that community need in order to stay there? Like before we build any highway, or I don't like highways, so don't build highways. But before we build, I love light rail. So before we build light rail, like what, who lives there, and how can we, prevent the displacement of these people before we do anything, And I feel like that didn't happen. Like I said, people knew what was coming before the community members ever did. So then we get the whole letters and phone calls and stuff to people's homes saying, hey, we want to buy your property, we want to buy your property. And that's kind of how we find out about something coming. It's like, oh, we're getting all these phone calls. So people call me and say, hey, my grandma got a phone call that, they want to buy her property, And then we're like, oh yeah, there's something in the works. So. Again, we saw that with the expansion of 183, and we saw it with the Project Connect.
Good.
Now with this neighborhood, we're surrounded by the highways. So
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a change for us. Something's always going to be changing in our neighborhood. Going back to Project Connect, I was on a lot of the focus groups and whatnot with Project Connect, and at the beginning, they were listening to us. But when they came out with with what they wanted to do over at the Central Library, I was pissed because, and I told them in their face when we had them come over here to our neighborhood, and they had a meeting with us with the neighborhood association. I was pissed. I was like, how dare you, have us thinking that you're listening to us, and then all of a sudden it's changed. I was pissed. I was very pissed off. And one of the things that one of the employees from Austin Transit Partnership, she was telling, because we're pissed off because that's when we found out about the maintenance facility coming over here, and because that wasn't on the drawing board at all. So when they showed us that, I was we were all pissed off. And what she tried to tell us is that it'll be a good thing for us, because then we can have our children and our neighbors get trained and get jobs at that facility. I was like, well, if that's what you want, then take it up north where you live, you know? Have your children do that.
I mean, and that's kind
I
of
just
like
don't understand the
just a continuation.
the impacts that it's gonna have in the long run.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like a continuation of what we've seen before, where it's like, we can put this thing in your neighborhood, you know, because we've always done it. That we've always put industrial things, commercial things that don't belong there in the middle of your community. If you don't know, the project, the rail line's gonna run on Riverside, and the maintenance facility is gonna be right in the middle of a neighborhood in East Austin, next to a mobile home park, actually.
Yeah. That through line of manufactured consent through making people think that they're actually involved in the decision making, and then being like, well, this is the decision we made and we involved you, we just didn't come to the conclusions that you gave us, is very common, and something that was also brought up in the previous panel as well. And also bringing up that point of how even the transportation solutions that aren't necessarily highways can still cause that harm that the highways are causing, connects directly to the last question of the panel from me about recommendations for how those impacted and allies can move forward at combating displacement, because it extends outside of just combating displacement caused by highways.
Yeah, to me, I mean, the biggest thing in Austin is housing affordability, land use, those questions, because those are like the questions of who has power, who gets to stay here in the city, who has to leave the city, and all of that. So one thing is just being very critical of anything that's, that says this is for the community, this is for, for affordable housing, for this. Is it really, have the people that you say are going to benefit from there, have they really been listened to? Have you really been considering them? One thing about like all of this is that unfortunately most of our people are going to be displaced, have been displaced, are being displaced, and will be displaced to the point where they're going to use us as, like we need highways because of people driving into Austin, So what happens with changes in land use policy, Project Connect, all of this thing, it pushes people outside of the city. But these people aren't, they're not just any people. They're the people that work in our restaurants, in our, our offices, in our schools, and all that. So they're going to have to come back, right? And so that's the thing about 35 right now, that the state is saying, like, oh, we're going to solve this traffic problem by expanding 35 or whatever, And it is true. There's a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of people that are driving from outside of Austin to work. But the way that I see it is like, but by these, harmful land policies, taking these harmful land policies, not thinking about how can we keep these people in the city, before, releasing this mass plan, we're exacerbating that. We're pushing people out of the city. They're gonna have to come back and drive. Like Madi was saying, a lot of people have ties to the community where they may live in Kyle, but they still want to come and they go to church here, go to any East Side church on Sunday. It's full of people that don't live here anymore, but they want to come back to their community. As far as like our schools, there's tons of students that they want to go to the school where they started at, where their parents went to school, and so now they live out in Del Valle, but they drive every single day. And of course, all the workers, right? So we're not thinking about those people when we're, developing the city, and so we're causing that problem, and we're actually giving TxDOT and, the state, a reason to expand the highway. Where if we had thought about, how can we help these communities stay in their community, run that train down Riverside. If we can stay in our communities and actually use it for work, use it to go downtown, wherever, but we're not doing that. We're displacing these communities, and they're all gonna have to drive back. They're all gonna be driving back. And so, sorry, how can you get, can you get involved? Look at the community groups that are actually organizing on the ground. There's a lot. There's from like small neighborhood associations, that are really connected to the community, to groups like Moderator. I work with Start Empowerment. Start Empowerment is my education one. With Community Powered, we really try, we work to involve the people that are most affected in all of this, and find those solutions. We understand that that's the only way that we're going to have like this equitable development, is that you have to involve the people that are most affected. Yeah.
I want to kick it back to the highway again. As far as how it's affecting the underserved communities. With the expansion of I-35, they're wanting to do a tunnel along Cesar Chavez, and that tunnel is going to catch all the crap that's coming from 35, right? And guess where it's going to go? Right over here to our pristine little piece of river, the Colorado River. It's going to get dumped there. And it's a shame, because all the feds, all they're gonna do is just put a mesh. Which, yeah, we're glad that they're gonna put something there, but that's not gonna catch all the particulate matter, And we do testing every month, myself and one of my colleagues. Every month we test that water, and it's clean. That testing tube that we look through, we can see clearly, and that's going to change once this happens, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Then it's going to end up like, then I said it's going to end up like how it is out there in the colonies. When we do the water testing out there, it's very bad. It's calcified and stuff like that, and that's what happens due to Tesla factories out there. So these other communities that we're also trying to help are also being impacted by what happens when you change the environmental sustainability in that area.
Yeah, that's one thing we haven't really talked about, like health and environmental impacts of this, the 35 expansion. And people don't really know about that. It took me a while to learn about the drainage that Pedro's talking about. They're gonna build a huge pipe to drain the tunnel, the I-35 tunnel, and it's all gonna go, just head east and go and dump into the river. So that's crazy, and not just to the river, but right where our community is.
Yeah, and I went to one of the open meetings, the house meetings or whatever that they call them. For that, with I think it was CapEx. They had an event the other day, or a week ago or so. And me and Susana went, and it was interesting to see with the map how it was going to help people that are in the land, in the floodplains, because of the expansion and the tunnels that they're doing. They're gonna be clear from that. But guess who's not? Us. And everything on the east side. And that again, it's horrible to see that. So for me, this last question, we need to elect people that are going to fight for us, that are listening to us, and not just listening to us, but actually following through with it. Because there's plenty of people that listen to us.
Right.
Plenty of people, and who really are passionate and really care about, the community.
Right.
And the displacement and the gentrification that's going to happen. We want them to stand up against that force. The People's Plan that we brought up in 2018. Now we can probably give a little bit in detail about that, but that would be great to implement. That would be a great source to implement. And then again, just throughout the city, just, fighting against the zoning changes, because that's the big thing, that's, the big thing, and of course, the highway. It's in the highway.
Yeah, I can talk about the People's Plan. So in 2018, a lot of organizers that work like in the communities came up with the People's Plan, which is a way to, stop the displacement of communities, East Austin, Montopolis, east of 35. Biggest things, was, adopting like a right to stay, right to return programs for East Austin residents. A lot of that was kind of adopted by the city, but not really, because there's no funding, there's no change in policy that would really allow for that. Like for example, when they demolish apartments, like right now, like DB90, density bonus programs, they are demolishing naturally occurring affordable housing. And there's no way for the residents that are living in those apartments to stay or to return to the new apartments, because the new apartments are going to be more expensive. So that's where this had come in. It's like, we want like a right to stay, or there has to be redevelopment, a right to return to those places where in our communities. So there's, they call it a right to stay, right to return, but there's no affordability measures to it. So if you want to return, you have to be able to afford the new prices of the redevelopments. So we also propose like a low-income housing trust fund that community can tap into, so that they can, it's kind of like anti-displacement funding essentially, where they can tap into if they need to pay back taxes so they can be able to stay. They can build an ADU in their backyard for a family member that needs housing. They can, things like that. So to have those real tangible options, like that's what we need. We need investment in fighting displacement that, really makes a difference. That's, really for the community.
I've been a part of a few of community-powered ATX. They're little community talks, and so right there off of 11th Street. So like just attending those, you kind of start to understand like how to organize and stuff like that. But I would say my biggest thing, and I probably reiterated this a few times, is just youth involvement. Because these kiddos are going to be the ones, residing in Austin for the rest of their lives. And you don't know how they're going to change the perspective of things in like 10, 15 years from now. So, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Those are all the questions that I have for you. I want to, since we have a little bit of time, open it up to a couple of questions from the audience, if anyone has any. Oh, right here, yeah.
Have you heard of green amendments?
Green amendments. Tell me.
Yeah. So it's a movement to add a constitutional amendment to the Texas Constitution that people have a right to clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, stable climate, etc. And there is a movement in Texas. And I recently read a book about green amendments and how they help communities fight. And so I guess my question would be, do you see something like that as like changing the legal landscape in a way that could help you? Like if it's a constitutional right that you can draw on, instead of having to go through all these things that you're talking about, with like the burden of proof being on you and the, people having full-time jobs and families.
Yeah, yes, I don't know how likely that is to pass in Texas, I guess. Sure. We did see some changes during the Biden administration with environmental justice. They gave a lot more funding to environmental justice organizations. The EPA was more active in actually listening to communities like ours, and we did see a big change in that, where we could bring those issues to the federal government, but it does, like Pedro said, electing people that actually care and actually, fight for you. I think that's one key.
Yeah, okay. Can we have another question? Does anyone have another question? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious for like school. There's been a lot of East Austin elementary schools went out had closed because there's less children.
Yes.
Some of the rental units. I mean, there's a lot higher increase in the number of units.
Mm-hmm.
I take it they don't have many children in there. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. Most of the developments are really focused on, first on making a profit, So and right now, of course, there's a lot of people moving in with higher incomes, and so who are they? They're mostly young people, single people, and so a lot of the development is geared towards younger people. Even if you do include 2 and 3 bedroom apartments in a development, a lot of times it's kind of like laid out for roommates rather than a family. So it's like 3 bedrooms, but also 3 bathrooms. And I go, if I have my family, I don't need 3 bathrooms, So it's,
Sometimes it helps.
Sometimes it helps. Everybody has their yeah, and so we kind of see that like development is really not geared towards families. And we have seen it, and I mean, one big thing is like I was saying, higher income people moving in, also the tech industry having a lot of influence over our policies. One of the schools that closed was Brook Elementary, which was due to all that Oracle development that happened, where they demolished all the apartments there. All those families would send their kids to Brook Elementary, and so when they demolished those apartments, the population decreased so much that they had to close down the school. Same thing with, Met Elementary. What's the other one that closed? Met, yeah. The same thing. It's like, land speculation, higher income people moving in without kids. And even in our community, we've seen that even if they do have families, a lot of times they don't send their kids to the local public schools either. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Can I ask just like what does a month of organizing look like? What does it you actually do? Like, does it involve going to city council meetings, writing petitions, having community meetings at a church or something? Like, what are the action verbs of fighting?
Yeah. So we all work in different campaigns. So Madi works with the education of the youth. Pedro works with transportation, mostly resilience and anti-poverty. And I work with the housing part of it. So I guess.
Yeah, to just to get a little bit more into it, like with the program we do with the kiddos throughout the month, it's 1 month, and we kind of teach them like basically like 101 organizing, like how to set it up, what it looks like to set it up. We have been, there's a few instances where we did take them to places to actually experience what it's like. So for city council, the youth has been there multiple times to kind of talk to the commissioners and stuff to tell them like they have a say in this and this is how they feel on the matter, so they speak up and stuff like that. We have taken them to do water testing to kind of understand what it's like when an environment is impacted by what's going on in the surrounding areas. And we also teach them the history of what's going on here in Metropolis from I-35 to here. And pretty soon I'm going to be going on with the ongoing developments of 183. So that's what we do, like on the youth parts.
That's not even all of it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more.
We're teaching everything from
juvenile justice and stuff like
justice, what the process is to become registered to vote,
Oh yeah,
the city process. So
yeah, we recently started doing, well, I'm not too sure if a lot of people knew, but last year we did a candidate forum with the YSJ. So they were able to ask the elected mayoral people, what are they going to do for their like community and stuff like that. So getting them engaged and stuff like that, I felt like was a little bit more easier because they became confident with like public speaking and not being scared to ask the questions of how does it affect me, or how are we incorporated into the ongoing matters.
If I believe I'm correct, I think that's the first that, you know, a youth group has ever initiated on the Canada Forum. Well, for myself, as a transportation coordinator, I try to go to as many meetings as I can. With Cap Metro, I've been involved with Cap Metro since, was it going on 5 years now? That they've been trying to do all this, the rail and whatnot. So I go to the committees. I was on a focus group. I was on the community investment. Now I'm a community connector with Cap Metro. So I stay busy with that, and a lot of times it's going to City Hall again and, you know, fighting for that, or just going to these, you know, individual meetings with them, and petitions, you know, even just for traffic light, you know, trying to get a traffic light right here in Vargas and Riverside. We got a petition for that. We wanted it for 3 years, but because they built another community right down the road on Riverside, more Caucasians over there, so they got the light first, you know, without even petitioning. So that was kind of crazy. But yeah, just, it's a lot of work, especially for this community, because not everybody is on social media. A lot of our community has elders, and I still go door to door to try to get these, you know, information out to my community. And so we're what, 4,000 houses now. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, with housing justice and land use stuff, it's a lot. There's a lot going on. So we try to keep everything balanced, like, or well, first keep updated with everything that's going on, whether it be like policy change that's coming, to like something as simple as, you know, there's like a new development being proposed in the community. Let's look at it. Let's see how it's going to impact. Yeah, door to door. Whether it be an apartment complex, you know, door knocking, or the neighborhood, you know, walking around the neighborhood. We created like tenants associations in in apartment complexes to make sure that they were involved in, you know, what's coming to their community, how it's going to be redeveloped. Yeah, so like one example was a lot of my former students live off of East Old Tour. One of their complexes was proposed for demolition, 210 apartments. They were going to completely demolish them, build through one of the new policies that the city passed a year ago called DB90. And the apartments that were going to be built there were not going to be affordable. So I literally just spent a week, almost every day, almost all day, knocking on doors, getting all the information, organizing all the tenants. We met with developers, city council members, mayor, you know, everybody, until we came with an agreement that, you know, they weren't only going to have the right to return, but they were going to have the right to return to affordable apartments. They were going to have the right to break their lease, to, you know, get their deposits back, you know, all of that stuff that you know, that helps when you're being displaced. And then one big thing is that I think you were talking about like family, you know, developments and how do you keep that. We agreed on the makeup of the apartments with the developer. Like it has to be 2 and 3 bedroom apartments because that's what's there right now. And so now the families, once this is developed, there's also going to be like help to finding affordable apartments in the area so that they're more likely to come back when this new development gets built. And so now the families can come back to an apartment that's 2 or 3 bedrooms, just like the one they live in, that's going to be affordable to what they're paying now, like and, you know, in the community where they're living. So things like that. So we it's a lot of work, but yeah, it takes, like I said, city council.
Even with the contact teams within the neighborhoods, you know, we've got to deal with the developers. You know, they're going to come to us, show us what they got, what they're working with, and we either agree or don't agree, and we'll see at city council or the planning commission. But sometimes those can go on and on because they either don't want to meet with us, you know, or I don't know, they just.
It's very, very.
That can be very hard sometimes.
Yeah, it's very difficult
Frustrating.
because our city council is very pro-developer and like very anti-community, so they try to take away the community input, community process from us. And so the developers know this, and so something as simple as like, hey, can we make sure that there's a safe road here, because there's families that walk through here, and I know that you want to bring 50 apartments, and you know that's going to increase traffic, but kids walk to school here. And trying to negotiate something like this, sometimes they don't even want to come and meet with us. And we try to talk to our council members, and a lot of them are like, no, we don't, you know, we don't want to make it more difficult for them to build or something like that. And I'm like, we just want a safe route to school. You know, we're not asking for a lot, you know, things like that. It's very difficult because, again, the makeup of the city council.
And
Yeah.
no, go ahead.
We have time for maybe one more question,
Okay.
but the answers are gonna have to be brief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just kind of curious, because I was talking to a friend the other day who said a relative of theirs works at TxDOT and that they were talking to them about the expansion and how bad it was. And the relative kind of said, well, you know, like we gave everybody notice, like we did. So there's kind of this, I feel like some people want to take that manufactured consent and just agree to it, that like that's justice done, or that's like, you know, we followed every rule that we could. What is your advice to potential allies who might fall into that trap, might see themselves currently as not impacted? How do you reconnect, I guess, with people who feel so disconnected or easily individualized now in the community? And how do you bring them back into the fold of like the fight and the struggle and help them understand like this is kind of an ongoing journey. This isn't a definitive story that like once we get to this point we will have won or lost or this or that.
Yeah, what I've done in our community, actually in a lot of Austin, when they ask me, is we do teach-ins where we talk about, you know, like just the connection of how what everything comes with it. Because yeah, there's people either that have moved into a community that don't really know how that's going to impact their neighbors or themselves. And some people, even people that we know in our community that are like, yeah, we don't trust them, they're going to do whatever they want, even if we show up to a community meeting. But yeah, we do teach-ins where we, you know, teach them all from the history to the current situation and all the things that you can do. And that really helps because it kind of brings out the conversation of like, you know, this is how it's going to affect me, but then also my neighbor that came to the teach-in, this is how it's going to affect them, and create those connections like that.
And it's really hard to get them to have a voice, you know, to speak up, because they, like Noe said, they already know they're not gonna listen to us, you know, so they don't care. But for me, like I was on Thomas Drive, you know, they came to the community, they did a listening session and whatnot about modifying Thomas Drive and, you know, what needs to be fixed, what, you know, upgraded or whatever. And I sent an email to them asking them how do they do their outreach, because I didn't know about it, and I'm on the neighborhood association, you know. And I saw it as I was walking down Matapas Drive, saw a little yard sign. But I reached out to them and said that they came back with saying that they did outreach and go to even to the local stores that we have in our neighborhood. I was like, that's a damn lie. 'Cause I have not seen any signs. I put signs in my neighborhood and all the businesses that I'm able to, you know.
One thing about Pedro is that you have to know that he rides the bus everywhere, he walks everywhere, so he gets to meet everybody. You know, if you're that kind of person, you run into everybody. the kids going to school, the parents picking up their kids, the people at the store in the middle of the day with our, so he gets to know every place and everybody. And so if you say we came to your neighborhood and we did this, and Pedro doesn't know, they didn't do a good job.
Basically, it's a lot more difficult to fall into those traps when you're connected with the people who are being impacted, because you know what they're going through, and so you can be like, no, actually, that's not what happened. But yeah, I want to thank y'all for painting those pictures and offering that important historical context, and then carrying us all the way through with the modern day and those tactics of kind of throwing some of the communities away, but also scapegoating them for the reasonings why a lot of the other decisions are happening, such as the highway expansions, because we've caused them to go out there. Now they're the reason why we're doing it, instead of the lobbyists that are actually the reason why we're doing it. And so I really appreciate all of you offering your perspectives for us today. And can we have a round of applause for our panelists? And then I want to thank all of y'all for coming out and hearing this. A lot of people don't really expand their perspectives when they're getting into that environmental work or when they're getting into that freeway fighting. And so it's very valuable to actually hear directly from the people who are being impacted. So I want a round of applause for all of y'all for being here today. And then last notes, any information that y'all have that you would like to be shared with the audience members, you can just email to me, and then we'll send y'all any supplementary material that is shared from our panelists. And then finally, we have still over there? We have a petition over here about the 183 expansion that if you haven't signed whenever you came in, you can go over there and sign it as well. And you can have a little bit of opportunity before we have to get out of here to speak with our panelists as we mix and enjoy some of our refreshments so we don't have to take these somewhere else. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.